Hi friends and welcome. If this is your first time here, my name is Tiffany and I'm the International Witch. A couple of weeks ago, I posted this video going through my entire library of books. And I had some wonderful recommendations put in the comments, so thank you so much if you left me a recommendation. And I also got a suggestion for another video. User KT7087 said a video idea, if you're looking for one, might be your top 10 recommended That's all, folks. A video idea, if you're looking for one, might be your top 10 recommended witch books with small reviews for each. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So thank you so much, KT, for the suggestion. So before we get into things, I just want to take a moment to explain my personal practice and to go over some certain terms that I'll be using, just so that we're all on the same page. First off, I am not Wiccan. I do not subscribe to any major religion, and I don't believe in any deities. With that being said, I do believe in archetypes. I do believe that cultures made these stories and these mythologies, and you can learn a lot about a culture through their mythology and their stories. So I think it's very important for us to learn about, but as for me, I don't work with any specific deity. I work with ancestors. I'm a hedge witch, and I work with the spiritual, that is a hard word, spiritual realm. So you won't see any Wiccan books here, and anything I think has a Wiccan swing to it, I'll let you know. But as for me, I am not Wiccan. Secondly, I consider a beginner book anything that you can learn off of the internet. Most of your beginner witch books are going to be things that are easily Googled. You know, the elements, the corresponding planets, basic deity information, how to call corners, which is Wiccan, like all of this stuff. If you were to Google how to be a witch or how to be a kitchen witch, you're going to get tons and tons and tons of resources. I am not going to waste my money on what I can get for free. And I'm not going to suggest that to you either. So all of my books, I feel, are intermediate. And when I say intermediate, I mean stuff that you can't get on the internet or that goes deeper, that is more knowledge. And that's because of where I am in my practice. I don't want to spend money reading stuff I already know. I want to walk away from a book thinking, you know, wow, that altered my perspective on something, or, oh, I never thought about that, or I learned something new. Like, for me to put money on a book, I need to walk away feeling like I got my money's worth. All of my books today are intermediary with one beginner book, but I don't say that these books are difficult by any means for any witch to read. These are not, I'm not asking for like college level. This is not professional level witchcraft. This is just more than what you can find on the internet, and I think they are worth the money. If you hear any noise in the background, my neighbors got a new washing machine like, I want to say 2 months ago, maybe 3. And when it goes, like, it must be rattling the walls up there because it shakes my roof. So if you hear any noise, I'm sorry, that's not me. So the first book that I'm going to suggest is the Hearth Witch's Compendium. And this is the only book that I would say kind of straddles the line on a beginner witch book. And that's because if you dig hard enough on the internet, obviously, yes, you can find recipes for essential oils and so forth. But if you want something on your shelf that like gives you plant information, gives you recipes, I really do think this is the best book on the market for your money. There's over 550 recipes in this book alone. So if I was going to get any kind of like kitchen witch, hearth witch recipe book, this would be the book. She is thick. She is worth every penny. Now, she is $30. I would never tell you that you have to go out and buy any of these books, but if you are going to be spending the money, I really do think that you will get your money's worth from this book. This has been one of the best reference recipe books that I have. It has everything from tinctures, oils, more home-based cleaning products, bath bombs, health and beauty stuff. Like, it has everything in there. Obviously, you can get recipes online for a lot of this stuff, but if you want an all-in-one resource, this is what I would suggest. Okay, the next book that I would suggest is Ember Grant's Mythology for a Magical Life. If you watched my other video on my whole library, then you know how much I love this book. I love this author. For me, in my personal practice, I find that I do research and I love learning the history of things, but I also love learning the new scientific stuff. How to put it? I don't like a lot of anecdotal stuff where it's a witch who, writes an entire book on how she feels and, her beliefs, but there's really no meat, no backing to it. And what I love about Ember Grant is I can't remember if it's an English teacher or a literature teacher, but her stuff is, she's got the sources. She's got the info to back it up. She's got the facts. She does all the connotations, like the sourcing. You will get so much researched knowledge. Like, honestly, for how much she's charging these books, I think she could charge more. That is how much I get out of Ember Grant's books. And I can say books plural because another one of her books is on this list as well. But Mythology for a Magical Life, I think, is a wonderful introduction to mythology and to folklore in general. And I would suggest this book to be like a Christmas present, a Yule gift, because it's set up to follow the year as it progresses. Each chapter would correspond to 1 month starting in January. And I feel that this is a wonderful way because you're learning about things as the seasons outside are changing. You learn about different cultures, different gods, the stories, how they all overlap, how they were made and affected by the weather. And like I said, she cites all of her sources. Like, you are getting a genuine, almost like a researched paper. Like, she does her homework on it. So I cannot suggest Ember Grant enough. You would not be disappointed in this book. Speaking of Ember Grant, the next one is The Words of the Witch, Writing and Speaking Your Magic. Now, I went to college. I had to take 2 literature courses. Obviously, I had high school lit. So there's a lot of things that I learned in school that she covers in her book. Once again, she's a teacher, and it really shows. She has a good concept on poetry, literature, like all of it together. And she teaches you how ancient spells were produced, what made ancient spells, the materials that they put it on. Some of it, like, I had to stop quite a few times because I found a topic so interesting that I was like, oh my goodness, I have to Google this. Like, I had never heard of. And for me, being as into folklore and history as I am, for me to have not have heard of some of this, I was like, oh my goodness, I was in heaven. But she goes through, how to write poetry, literature, the iambic pentameter. I am having such a hard time speaking today, but she teaches you how poetry is structured, how to write poetry, how to convert songs and poetry that already exists into a form that works for you, for your spell work, for your chants. And I also love that she's very specific in her wording. There's a lot of terms that I hear God, I think I've been a witch now for 13 years. And I'll hear some people that like interchange some verbiage, and it may not be a big deal to others, but to me they're completely different things. And so I love that she takes the time in her book to explain what each item is, what their difference is. You're not going to find that in a beginner witch book. This is going to sound so bad, but a lot of people, when they start to learn witchcraft, they immediately within like a year turn around and start teaching it without like fully grasping the nuances. And you can tell that she researched, she studied, she knows what she's talking about, and I really appreciate that, because our words are power. When you hear the word spelling, like you need to spell the word, you are enchanting your words, and words are so important. I would suggest this especially to any beginner witch, not that it's a beginner book, because like I said, you're going to find so much more information in here. But for someone who is just starting out and is uncomfortable with writing their own spells or afraid to write their own spells, she goes through all of it. You would be so more confident after reading this book. So I highly suggest that one. This one I just read this year. A lot of the books that I am suggesting have come out within the last 3 years, and that's because we're getting more information. And for the longest time, when the witchcraft books first came out, there was that like big boom, especially in 2016 when, you know, the Great Witch Talk came out and everyone was buying books. So the beginner witch books were a huge thing because they were just throwing it out. Let's get as much books out as we can, you know, cash cow. And now that that's kind of run its course, like everyone has read the beginner books, now we're starting to see an influx of more intermediate. We want to buy a book and hear from someone who knows what they're talking about. So I'm really happy with the way that the tides have turned, because now I feel like they're much more worth their money than they used to be. So both of Ember Grant's books, Words of the Witch and Mythology for a Magical Life, I would highly suggest to anyone. I can read them multiple times. Each time I learn something new. You will get your money for these. Okay, the next book that I'm going to be covering is Of Blood and Bones, Working with Shadow Magic and the Dark Moon by Kate Fruhler. Now, this one, I'm just gonna say this out in the open. If you have a problem with animal byproducts, if you have a problem working with blood, if you're a vegetarian, don't pick up this book and then bash it because it talks about using animal byproducts. Like, it's in the title, Of Blood and Bones. If you have a problem with those, this is not the book for you. But for me, I think it's very important. We have had the toxic positivity, love and light, don't even think negative kind of shoved down our throats for so long. And that's not sustainable. Like, I can teach you how to put out a fire, but if you don't know how to start a fire and you don't know what causes a fire to start, then you're not going to see warning signs, correct? But me teaching you how to start a fire does not mean that you're all of a sudden going to start, you know, torching your neighbors' houses. It's the same way with hexes and curses. Nobody wants to talk about hexes and curses, but I think it's important for every witch to at least know how to perform a hex or a curse, because by knowing how it happens, you can also know how to reverse them or how to avoid them. I think just pretending that things don't exist in the world is not doing a witch a good service. This book, she goes into working with your darker aspects, and I love the fact that she points out that all good aspects, when in large quantities, can become bad aspects. So even if you are not, you know, cursing someone necessarily, you can like overabundantly bless them into being a curse, if that makes sense. She puts it a lot better in the book, but I loved that she talks about things that are taboo and that we don't want to talk about, but we really need to talk about. And especially because Wicca is not a traditional witch type. It was made in the 50s. It's the very modern, new, whitewashed way of doing witchcraft. Traditional witches and traditional witchcraft did have animal sacrifice, mostly a chicken. I mean, you can see it still practiced in many parts of the world, even in the deep south, Appalachian Mountains. So to just ignore that any of this exists, not talk about it, I think is a very bad way for our culture to progress. You have to know about it. We have to be able to have these conversations. I really, really, really enjoyed reading this book. I would suggest this book if someone has already read all the beginner stuff online and they want more knowledge. Ultimately, that is what I'm trying to give you today. This is stuff that you're not going to easily find online, and it's written by credible sources. So I would highly suggest Of Blood and Bones. It's one of my favorites that I've read in the past 2 years. As a matter of fact, when did it come out? Did it come out last year? Oh, it came out in 2021. Oh. I thought it was newer than that. That tells you how up to date I am on books, but still highly, highly, highly recommend Of Blood and Bones, one of my favorite books. This one is new. So, as a matter of fact, I just finished reading it. If you go to my blog, I have the book review posted for this book so I post my book reviews on Wednesdays, and then I post my YouTube videos on Friday. So on Wednesday, this has posted. And it is the Celtic Hedge Witchery, A Modern Approach by Joey Morris. So I'm a hedge witch, and I have such a hard time finding really good hedge witchery books. And for me, this is the closest to my personal practice that I have ever come across. It is wonderful. And there's so many things in here that like made me face myself and face how I was raised and my programming, because there was a lot of times that I had that knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, that's too woo-woo, that's not true. But then when you start thinking about it more and like the science is behind it, you were like, oh, wait, this does make sense. Why did I immediately, dismiss it? And I found that so refreshing. Like, I love a new point of view. And like I said, she practices very much the way I do. And I love the fact that she comes out and says, I researched the traditional way of doing things, but ultimately, I'm not going to ignore modern technology and modern science. I'm going to incorporate the two together, and then I practice what I preach, and if it works, then that becomes part of my practice. And I think that is the most honest and authentic way of doing anything. I know there's a lot of like reconstructionists who say, no, you should do it exactly the way that they did it back then. But the problem is, especially like with the Celts, because the Celts had very little written information. They had the Ogham, but they didn't have like full records. We can only make assumptions. Like, we can't know 100% what they did. I think it's silly to just ignore all the facts that we've learned just to fit into a mold of what it used to be. Like, I don't like it when people use their religion to ignore facts. You know who I'm talking about? So for her to say, look, this is my personal way of thought. These are the facts that I use to get there. This is the history that I reviewed. This is the science that backed it up. And here's how I did it. And I love that. I think as witches, we need to continually learn. Witchcraft is not a set in stone religion. It's not a religion at all. It can be completely separate. And I think it's important for us to keep striving, to keep learning, to keep incorporating and growing better as ourselves. So even if you aren't Celtic, like, she hits on some of the Celtic gods, but not much. Like, you can do this and not be a Celtic witch. So don't let the Celtic title kind of hold you back, because the information in here, I am going to say it right now. If you were to get one book, if you consider yourself a hedge witch or you're interested in being a hedge witch, this is the book I would suggest. Out of my whole pile, I think this is the one I'm most passionate about, because I have been searching for this book since I started my witchcraft journey. I realized that I was more of a hedge witch than a green witch around the 1 to 2 year mark, and I have been looking for a good hedge witch book ever since. And this one is the best I have ever gotten my hands on in the market today. It is so worth the money. As a matter of fact, it says it's $19. So I have paid more for books that I hated. As a matter of fact, I had to stop so many times when reading this book because it inspired me to make a grimoire page. I've made like at least 6 grimoire pages already that should be up on my grimoire site just from this book. This has been the book of the year for me. It's going to be hard for any other book to top this one because it was so good. I would suggest Celtic Hedge Witchery, A Modern Approach by Joey Morse to anyone. This is a fantastic book. Joey, if you're watching this, mwah, love you, girl. You did good, and I can't wait to hear the next. Let me take a break since I mentioned the grimoire downloads. If this is your first time here, then you may not know, but I run a blog, and if you subscribe to my newsletter on the homepage of my website, you will get a code in your email, and you go to the grimoire section of my website and put that code in, and you will get access to the grimoire. And those are all free printables. I am constantly updating them every month. You can download and print as many times as you want. All I ask is that you please don't pin anything from my password protected area onto Pinterest. But I do grimoire pages, I do the bullet journals. If you ever watch the bullet journals on my page, all of those get uploaded into my grimoire section as well. So the next book on my list is Consorting with Spirits, Your Guide to Working with Invisible Allies by Jason Miller. As I said, I am a hedge witch and I work predominantly with ancestral spirits and land spirits. So I love getting my hands on a really good veneration or spiritual book. I have a couple others that I think are really, really good. But Jason Miller's book, I think, was one that kind of went above and beyond. He had so much extra in there that I hadn't heard before, and intriguing new ways of looking at things that I hadn't thought of. So even though I've done ancestral veneration for years, I went away from this book thinking, wow, I learned something new, which for me, like I said, that's the goal of every book. I came away thinking, wow. So I would highly suggest that one. I know it went its rounds around TikTok and Book Talk for a bit, so I was kind of hesitant to buy it then. I waited a couple years, but it's worth the hype. It was really, really good. I will only have one caveat to say on it, and that is, in the book, he teaches you how to force a spirit to appear against its will. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know, kidnapping someone never works out well in your favor, especially someone on the other side, because as soon as they get free, you're on their list. So that's my only note on this book. Excellent book. Great information. Don't force a spirit. Okay. Now on to the next book. I was raised in North Alabama. I was an Appalachian baby, and Appalachia there's nowhere else like it on earth, I think. When you talk about America being a melting pot of cultures, the Appalachians were the OG melting pot. Like, think of New York City, but spread out on a mountain range. You had people who were in a very harsh climate who had to rely on each other heavily. You couldn't just run to a doctor. I mean, to get to a doctor, you would have to get down the mountain, and I mean, that could take hours or days depending on how far you were. So the need for herbalism and for, magic, just praying, you would have elders, your granny, your, wise people coming to your door, like, to help you. They would band together. And so there's this big, I would say, merging of cultures, ideals, and beliefs. And it's very, very easy to appropriate, and you have to be very careful, because I was raised, you know, my mom and my grandmother, they did a lot of things that would now be considered appropriation. But back in those times, they were just trying to figure out a solution. Something was wrong, they had a problem, they needed to fix it, and someone told them how. And ultimately, like, that's the history of the Appalachians. You had your Native Americans, you had your Germans, you had your British, you had your Scots-Irish. I'm Scots-Irish. Like, you had all these different people who came with their different stories and their different histories and beliefs, and like their different remedies, their different recipes, and they banded together so close-knit that it was almost impossible for any outsider to form a bond with any of them. They were so close. I was worried about how that would be portrayed, but Auburn Lily did an amazing job. She herself lives in the Appalachians, and I think that this was the best possible way for Appalachia to be written down and spread. The information is true. She is very gentle when talking about other cultures, and she's honest about the culture melding. I think if you are ever interested in Appalachian witchcraft, you want to learn more about it, this is the book for you. I can't say enough about it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. The next book is Italian Folk Magic, Ruse Kitchen Witchery by Mary Grace Fayroux. I have talked about this book before. It is one of my all-time favorites. As someone who lives in Campania, I live in Napoli and Campania in Italy, it is the most authentic English written book about Italian witchcraft I have ever come across. And I've come across a lot. If you watched my video, you know about the other books. When you read her book, the authenticity just shines through. Everything she talks about, the kitchens down in the garage, the nonna spitting, you know, the malocchio, like, I have encountered all of it here in Italy. And I can tell you from someone who is living and breathing Tesseron, this is the best Italian witchcraft book on the market. I love, love, love the book. It is a joy to read. She has so many stories from her childhood that you really feel like you're talking to a friend and not necessarily reading like a scholarly book. But there is so much information. It is all accurate. I think if you are interested in learning about the apotropaic magic of another country, I think this is a great resource for you. So the next book that I'm going to be discussing is Glamour Magic, The Witchcraft Revolution to Get What You Want by Deborah Castellano. This book was one of the very first introductory books that I read about glamour magic. Like, I had heard about glamour magic spells, but I have never gotten my hands on a book that was devoted purely for glamour magic. And I think this is a wonderful resource, especially if you've ever been curious about glamour magic. She goes through a lot of different recipes and spells. And now I'm going to say this one is more anecdotal. There's not much in a bibliography or, sources kind of way. But if you are interested in glamour magic, I highly, highly enjoyed this one. And so I think you would too. I know that there's a couple of others that came out after this book, but I haven't read those, so I can't suggest one way or another. But I do think that this book opened my eyes to a new type of magic that you really only got a dabble of here or there online. So I do think that this book is worth a share or a read. The last book on my list is by Ilhoim Lafar, and he is part of the LGBTQ community, a person of color, but he does so much in the community and he practices what he preaches. You can constantly see him on his Instagram doing the work. He teaches in New York. Very, very amazing person. And the book is The Magical Art of Crafting Charm Bags, 100 Mystical Formulas for Success, Love, Wealth, and Well-Being. I love this book because, as I said, I try to learn something new. I don't want information that I am just going to get on the internet. And even though this book is about charm bags, which is one of the like most easily Googled thing out there, he goes in depths and really makes you think about each and every piece to put together for these bags, even down to the day of the week, the time of the year, the time of the day, correspondences, all these things that like you wouldn't think about. He takes you step by step and says, no, this is important. You need to give these, considerations. And the amount of thought process and detail behind his bags, I highly, highly suggest this one. I think this is a wealth of knowledge in a book. Now, I am going to say he used to be Wiccan. I think he had a couple of books came out that were Wiccan. I'm not Wiccan, but I still think you could use these books. There's a couple of like Call in the Corners. Just ignore those if you are not Wiccan and you don't feel compelled for them. But I think it is one of the better resources out on the market. He has a couple of new books, Dream Witchery, and what's the other one? I have one more book. It's in my reading list. I have the book. I will finish it, but he is an amazing person. And if you're looking for a book that goes above and beyond what you're going to get on the internet, this is one of the books. Those are my top 10 books. These are books that I would recommend to anyone that I get multiple uses out of. I could read these books over and over. They're a joy to read. They fulfilled my thirst for knowledge. I watched a couple of videos about, top 10 books. And there's a couple of books that I kept seeing, and I feel bad for not putting it in this list, but unfortunately, I'm very picky with my books. If I don't like the book, it doesn't matter how popular it is, it's not going in the stack. And this one book kept popping up, and unfortunately, I know it's popular right now. I'm not a fan. So for me to tell you this book is worth the money, you can take that to the bank. I would never put my name behind something that I was not 110% sure on. And these books are wonderful. You can read them multiple times. And like I said, like the Celtic hedge witchery, like I was inspired every moment of that book. As always, we're in a society of overconsumption, and we think the books are the products when in reality we are the products. They're trying to get as much money from us as possible, and they're throwing books out left and right. They're not vetting the authors. They're not vetting the information inside of it. Be very suspicious when reading a book. If you have the chance to borrow it from someone or read it from a library, which I know occult books are very difficult to find at the library, secondhand books, thrift books. I know a lot of people don't like going through secondhand stores to look for a book, but ultimately don't buy things you don't need. Try to reduce the amount that you spend. And so while all 10 of these books I think are worth the money and I would suggest them, if you are not in the financial place to buy a book, don't buy a book. Don't feel like you have to buy a book. These are my opinions. These are just if you are already in the market for a book, these are what I would suggest. Try not to give more money to Bezos. Unfortunately, here in Italy, I'm kind of like forced to use the almighty machine, but I really do think these books are a wonderful, wonderful representation of witchcrafts, wonderful resources. The authors are great. I would support these authors. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. I have a couple of books coming that were recommended to me in my previous video. So if there's any books in here that you didn't see that you think are your favorites and that you would highly suggest someone read, leave it in the comment below. I'm always looking for new books, and I hope that I'll see you in my next video. Bye. Love you.